ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Liberty McArtor.
Welcome to Point of View and welcome to the Roundtable. We're just 2 days out from Christmas, so I hope that you are having a wonderful and blessed time preparing for this special holiday. But we still have a lot of issues to discuss, so thank you for being with us today on the Next Generation Roundtable. This hour, I'm joined by Joshua Barnes and Ethan Watson. Next hour, we'll be joined by Steven Mosley and Will Barclay, all voices that, if you listen to the Roundtable often, you will be well familiar with. So today, starting off, we're going to be talking about AmericaFest, which happened over the weekend. If you're not aware, this is Turning Point USA's big annual event. Of course, this was the first event they held without Charlie Kirk himself being there. But a lot of things happened, and it was really kind of a magnification of some discussions that are happening within the conservative movement, particularly among young right-leaning voters. And so it's important for us, especially on the Next Generation Roundtable, to talk about that. We're going to be discussing what does it mean to be a conservative? What does it mean to be an American? What are young voters saying and thinking about those things? And then we'll talk about some news in the next hour, including the rescheduling of marijuana by President Trump, the economy, whether or not young Americans bought his encouragement about the economic progress, Islamic terror in Europe, and more. But let me welcome my fellow co-host this hour. Of course, you know Josh Barnes. He's a pastor, the creator of the Bible Explained YouTube channel, and a frequent guest on Point of View. So, Josh, thanks so much for being with us today.
Always a pleasure, Liberty. Thanks for having me.
And Ethan is with us. He is a Young Voices contributor and an incoming O'Connor Fellow and JD candidate at Arizona State University. He has multiple degrees. He writes for multiple different news organizations, and definitely a voice that we appreciate having here on Point of View. So, Ethan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Merry Christmas.
Yes, Merry Christmas. Again, it's an exciting time of year. I know we're all probably thinking about our plans and getting together with family. But let's talk about what happened over the weekend for a few minutes. I want to start with an article. You can find it at pointofview.net if you're listening and you want to follow along. And this is from Ben Shapiro. He kicked off AmFest with quite a bang, and it had reverberations throughout the entire three-day conference. And I think, personally, this is my take, that he said some things that needed to be said, as we've addressed on Point of View within the conservative movement, especially in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. There has been conspiracy theories that have popped up. A lot of people kind of ignored them for a while, but some of these are coming from the number one podcasts in America, including Candace Owens or others who are among the top 5, like Tucker Carlson. And so what I think Ben Shapiro, who of course is the founder of the Daily Wire, I think he did a great job of really outlining the responsibilities that people, as he said, with a mic have. And that includes speaking the truth. One of the things he said is that a unity without truth is no unity. It is merely solidarity in falsehood. He said that people really need to act and speak on principle, not personal feelings. We've heard this a lot. A lot of influencers on the right have said, I don't want to call out certain people who maybe be saying things that I don't agree with because, you know, they're my friend. I've known them for a long time. I care about them. He said, in this, when you have that kind of influence, principle trumps personal loyalty. Other people disagreed with that. I would love to get y'all's take, Josh and Ethan. He also talked about the responsibility to take responsibility. For instance, if you promote a white nationalist on your podcast, then you have a responsibility to ask critical questions, or at least if you agree, be honest about that. Present evidence instead of floating conspiracy theories, and then provide solutions so that people have hope. So I thought he did a good job outlining that. Again, he was kind of lambasted for the rest of the conference. But Ethan, let me start with you. You're a resident Gen Z member during this hour. I'd love to get your thoughts on what Shapiro said, or in general, what happened at AmFest. I know we were emailing kind of about the future of the young right. And so what's your perspective?
Absolutely. I mean, AmFest was certainly one for the record books this year. And I think Ben was absolutely correct to point out that these conspiracy theories, especially about Charlie Kirk's assassination itself, accusing Turning Point or even Erica of some kind of impropriety, that's all garbage and that should be called out. Where I depart from Ben's view is I think he poured a lot of gasoline on the fire by getting up and calling out people so directly. I think there's a time and a place for ideological purity. I think those are luxuries that we can afford when we're winning. And right now, the conservative movement, especially from a Gen Z perspective, is floundering. The Trump admin has sort of been focused on PR and boondoggles and snarky plaques in the White House instead of accomplishing the things that we elected him to do. And it's not looking great for us in the midterms, and we have a real chance at losing power. And when that happens, if left-leaning people take control again, I don't think they're really going to care whether you're a Tucker fan or a Candace fan or a Daily Wire subscriber. I think they bring down the hammer of lawfare and censorship on everybody again. And so I think right now, these ideological purity tests, I don't think we can afford to fight that fight right now. Now with Charlie Kirk and the conspiracy theories around his death, that's a separate issue because the presence of those breaks us up. And we need to make sure we're on the same page when it comes to that. But as far as going beyond and saying, oh, well, you can't talk to Nicholas Fuentes or you can't, Tucker's a bad actor or Candace is a bad actor. As a general rule, we need to be united and focused towards the more pressing threat and working on what we can agree on together. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, and Ethan, thank you for articulating that because I do think that is one of the concerns that, is kind of dividing many people on the right now is, hey, we can't afford to lose. Like there's too much at stake. We've got a lot of issues on the radical left, clearly, and including political violence. And so, Josh, we have a couple minutes before the break, so I'll let you get started. And if you have thoughts to wrap up when we come back, you can certainly do so. But what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, and with all respect to Ethan, I understand your position there. I understand where you're coming from, but I do think that I take the other side of it. I think Shapiro was spot on. If you listen to what he said, he was very careful, and I thought that he summarized really well what he was trying to get at by using the analogy of the border. And he said, countries without borders are not countries. You have to have a border or you can't call it a country. And ideologies without borders are not ideologies. If we're going to be the conservative movement, we have to say this is not conservatism and this is conservatism. And if we just make a big tent and say everything that wants to call itself conservatism is in our tent, we might win elections, but we will lose conservatism. And I think that's a great point. I think he's exactly right. I think Nick Fuentes, if you actually listen to the things that he has said and continues to say, is absolutely detestable. And for Shapiro to point out not only is that not conservatism, but for hosts that call themselves conservative to invite Fuentes on and to give him sort of to boost his numbers, to act as if he's one of us, and make him paint him in the best light possible and not ask him any hard questions, is to assume that Fuentes is a conservative, and then paints our entire movement as if we're Nick Fuentes. I think.
Yeah. This is the debate that's playing out. We've got great perspectives both from Josh and Ethan, and we will continue to discuss it when we come back from this break.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
During this Christmas week, we've been providing a theological perspective on some of the classic Christmas carols, but today I thought we might look at a contemporary song associated with the Christmas story. Mary Did You Know is a Christmas song addressing Mary, the mother of Jesus. The lyrics were written by Mark Lowry in 1984. The music was written by Buddy Green in 1991. It was originally recorded by Michael English in his 1991 solo album. The song asks many questions. None of the questions are answered in the song. Instead, the lyrics poetically invite the listener to contemplate the relationship between Mary and her newborn divine son. It implies that she may not have understood what would unfold. That is possible since Jesus humbled himself to live as we do. The Bible tells us in Philippians 2 that Jesus emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant and being made in the likeness of men. The first stanza begins with these questions. Mary, did you know that your baby boy will one day walk on water? Mary, did you know that your baby boy will save our sons and daughters? Did you know that your baby boy has come to make you new? This child that you delivered will soon deliver you. The last stanza ends with these questions. Mary, did you know that your baby boy is Lord of all creation? Mary, did you know that your baby boy will one day rule the nations? Did you know that your baby boy is heaven's perfect lamb? This sleeping child you're holding is the great I Am. These questions cause us to reflect on the wonder of the incarnation of Jesus. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Thanks for being with us today on the Next Generation Roundtable. We're talking about what happened at AmericaFest over the weekend, which is Turning Point USA's big event, and it really is a good barometer to see what is the young conservative movement thinking. What are they talking about? And some debates were playing out on the AmFest stage, and we're kind of talking about those different perspectives here. Specifically, do we need to really call out people who are not expressing conservatism in the way that we think they should or in the way that we think is morally right? Or are the stakes so high that we need to just continue to broaden the tent instead of imposing ideological purity tests, as some have called them? So I want to keep talking about this because it really, I think, does get down to the root of what a lot of young people, millennials and Gen Z, are wrestling with regard to the future of the GOP, the conservative movement, and the nation. But Josh, I know we went to a break. Did you have anything that you wanted to say to finish up your thoughts that you were expressing to us?
Right. Well, I did want to kind of balance what I was saying. It is true that we do need to unite. We need to where we can find common ground. Where we agree on conservative principles, we should unite with those people where we agree on those things, because that's how you win battles politically. Even in the faith, as Christians, we should unite. Instead of dividing over, how to take communion, we should unite over the gospel, those sort of things. So this is true about the conservative movement as well. So there's a lot of merit. I didn't want to take away from what Ethan said, because there's a lot of merit to that uniting. But I do think that even Ethan and I it sounds to me that we probably agree that there is at least some extremes where we can't unite. Ethan mentioned that you can't unite over going after Erica Kirk after her husband was killed. And so there is at least some extreme that we will agree that is not conservatism, and we have to call that out. I just think that maybe there's a few more things also that we should also say this is not conservatism, and we should call that out as well.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you on that, Josh, but I also want to acknowledge you and I are both millennials. And so, Ethan, let me turn to you, because something someone said on a podcast that I was listening to recently made a point that I hadn't really thought about before. And so I don't want to presume your exact age, Ethan. I know you're young and also extremely accomplished, but they were making the point that for a lot of Gen Z voters today, you guys didn't really, weren't voting necessarily in a pre-Trump GOP. And I was. And so I've seen this shift toward the more Trumpian conservatism or populism, really, from kind of the traditional like Reagan-Bush conservatism. And so I'm wondering, Ethan, what are the big issues that your generation, specifically more on the right, is really talking about and thinking about? Because I really think that kind of the era in which we came to political maturity, so to speak, really does impact kind of what we see as the priorities. So I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Absolutely. And first of all, I think what the back and forth with Josh and I is we're engaged in line drawing here. We're deciding what's within the tent, what tactics and viewpoints are acceptable. And that's a good discussion to be having. You're right. I am fairly young. I'm 24. I became politically aware during the first Trump term. I don't really remember a GOP prior to Donald Trump, and a lot of people my age don't. But here's what we do observe. And I think this is where sort of that frustration and that sort of fiery rhetoric and our draw towards more fiery fringe personalities comes from, is because we see, Bush era conservatism and John McCain as having failed us, because I look at an America that my parents grew up in, that my grandparents grew up in. That's not the America I got to grow up in, and I don't think that's the America my children will get either. And so I think I heard it put best that people my age are nostalgic for a life that we never actually got to live. And America doesn't look like the way it used to. And that's what we yearn for desperately. And we feel like sort of the more moderate conservatism, the McCain, the Romney, even to some degree the Daily Wire, depending on which personality we're talking about, has sort of failed to conserve anything. And it's just been a managed decline into increasing leftism, higher prices, harder to start a family, less public religion. And so we fear that nothing has actually been conserved at all. And that's where the frustration comes from in my demographic.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. And that is important for those of us who didn't have that same experience in youth and in, the era that we were kind of getting engaged with politics for the first time. It's important to listen to that and not dismiss it. And again, we can have these conversations like we're having now and have the disagreements and the back and forth. But if we're not really listening to what young people are saying are their big concerns, then I think we're going to miss a huge opportunity. But I do want to mention Vivek Ramaswamy as well, because, we kind of, Ben Shapiro was like, hey, we got to draw lines. He had given a speech previously a couple days before AmFest at the Heritage Foundation, in which he said that the conservative movement needs to enforce its borders, and basically was saying that the Heritage Foundation should be doing that. And so he was talking about what does it mean to be a conservative. He outlines what he believes that means. Vivek Ramaswamy then came to AmFest, and he's written in the New York Times about it as well, and talks about what does it mean to be an American? Are we a creedal nation, meaning that we coalesce around ideas and that's what unifies us, or is there something more? He really called out what he identified as this kind of new idea maybe of a heritage American, which doesn't just mean that, I'm proud of my American heritage, but that people who maybe say can trace their ancestors up to the Mayflower or the American founding are more American than somebody who is a first or second generation immigrant, even if they came here legally and fully, support the Constitution and everything like that. So, Josh, back to you. What's your thought on really anything we've talked about? But I know you said you wanted to talk about Ramaswamy's speech too. So take it away.
Yeah, I thought so. I had so many mixed emotions about Ramaswamy. Like when I listened to his speech, I thought it was a great speech, and I thought he did a great job. I think he also did a great job of calling out Fuentes, which as conservatives, I do think we need to do. So that was good. I think that he makes a good point about this, about what is it to be an American. To be an American is to love America as it was founded. Essentially, the more conservative you are, the more American you are, because the more you want the country to be like it was founded to be. And it doesn't really matter how long you've been here. If you love the country as founded, that makes you an American, at least at heart, even if you are working through the process of becoming a citizen. And those should be the kinds of people that we want to be citizens in America, people who love the country as it's founded, what it is, rather than people who want to love their old country and change this one to be as much like, Somalia or so on. So I thought that was great. I also have mixed emotions about Vivek because Vivek doesn't understand Christianity, and he revealed that in his speech. If you listen to it, he talks about how humans are inherently good, and that's taught by Christianity, and that's actually not taught by Christianity. We are inherently evil, but Christ died for our sins, gives us a salvation, and so on and so forth. We're inherently, because of Adam, evil. not because of our creation. We're created in the image of God. So there's a nuance there. There's, I think, for Vivek, what he doesn't understand is the link between Christian principles and conservatism, which is a very, very strong bond. And he doesn't quite understand that. He loves conservatism, and I'm praying that God will help him follow conservatism upstream until he finds Christianity and becomes a believer in Christ.
Yeah, good points, Josh. So we really only have a little bit of time before the break, so I'll kind of sum it up, and then Ethan, we'll come back to you after the break, because I really want to get your perspective more on what you were saying a few minutes ago, and also on this, what it means to be an American. One of the things Vivek said in his speech, and by the way, he is currently running for governor of Ohio, is that he and Charlie Kirk had a long talk about faith and what it means to believe in God before Charlie's death. And so I'm with you, Josh. I'm praying for him because he says a lot of good things. But here's just a couple of quotes. He basically said, "What does it mean to be an American in the year 2026? Again, emphasizing what you said, Josh. It means we believe in those ideals of 1776. It means we believe in merit, that the best person gets the job regardless of their skin color. It means we believe in free and open debate, free speech and open debate, even for those who disagree with us, from Nick Fuentes to Jimmy Kimmel. You get to speak your mind in the open without the government censoring you." And I thought that was a good point, because whether or not you agree with Ben Shapiro, he was using his free speech, and others who came on the stage after him and were responding, they were using their free speech. A lot of people are accusing him of canceling or trying to deplatform people. I don't necessarily see that as the case, because I think the censorship we really need to be concerned about is government censorship. But criticizing people and having these debates is what free speech is all about. I was glad to see that play out, and we're going to do some more of that when we come back from this break, so stay with us.
Do not miss the fact that this is an exciting time in America. Record numbers of Gen Z returning to church, reading the Bible. God is clearly moving. But it's also a critical time. Without trustworthy biblical guidance, without spiritual mentors willing to disciple, those young people full of zeal today could be led astray tomorrow. And that's why I urge you to partner with Point of View and equip the mentors the next generation needs. When you support Point of View, you provide a wealth of resources to equip Americans to think biblically about every issue relevant to life today. Your support could supply the tools that someone needs to apply biblical truth in discipleship. So partner with us today, and your gift will be doubled through December 31st. So give today at pointofview.net, or you can call us 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Liberty McArtor.
Thanks for being with us on the Roundtable. If you're wondering what we're talking about, or you didn't watch any AmFest coverage and you want to see some of these speeches that we're referencing, go to pointofview.net, go to today's show. We have links for every article that we're discussing. So, Ethan, I'd love to hear from you. What's your perspective on this debate between heritage American or the idea that America is an idea? Or is there something in the middle? Does it have to be as extreme as your family had to come over on the Mayflower? Is there a little bit something more to being an American and having that identity? What are your thoughts?
It's probably somewhere in the middle. I can't trace my ancestor to the Mayflower. I can trace it back to the early 1800s, but that's a little bit, that's as far as I can go with that. I think Vivek is right in that anybody can be American by adopting our ideas and our traditions. But I think where people were a little bit incensed by what Vivek said was that he seems to overlook where those ideas came from. They didn't just materialize out of nowhere. They were ideas that were in the heads of European Christians in this particular place in time and space. The ideas that gave birth to America didn't emerge in India or Brazil or China or Korea or anywhere else. They were European and Christian ideas and culture that underpins these values. And these values don't work without that cultural underpinning. They've tried it before. There's an African country called Liberia where they copied our constitution in spirit and in language. And Liberia is not a prospering, safe place to live today because it doesn't have that cultural underpinning. And so I think the crux of the heritage American argument is about reminding people that, no, there actually is a cultural underpinning here in America. It's an American/European Christian culture. And that is what people who come here ought to be assimilating to. Now, the beautiful thing about that culture and about those values is that they transcend superficial things like race, right? Anybody can credibly claim to be an American if they speak our language, worship our God, partake in our customs and our traditions, from blue jeans to McDonald's to football and even the more important things. That's something that's unique about America. No matter if I move to Japan and speak fluent Japanese and my children's children do the same thing, they'll never be Japanese because they are white people. That's not the way America works. America transcends all of these superficial racial boundaries, but it does involve being a part of a dominant culture. And that cultural underpinning is absolutely necessary for the function of our society. And so I think that's what people took issue with Vivek. And I just want to say for the record, I love Vivek. I go back and forth on him, especially on faith issues, but I think Vivek is an absolute model of someone who is, come to America more recently and has absolutely made it a better place. But I think that's where people were incensed by what Vivek had to say.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I agree. He's definitely a figure to watch, somebody that I like a lot of what he says. So I would agree. And I think that J.D. Vance did a good job of addressing this in his speech. I had things, I was like, some of the things that he said, and we'll talk about his address at AmFest in a minute, I was giving thumbs up. Other things I was like, come on, man, be a little stronger. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But I really do think the Christian understanding of what it means to be human, natural law, what our rights are, all of those things are really the foundation of the American founding. And of course, the American founding wasn't perfect. They said all men are created equal in the Declaration of Independence, and many of them had slaves. So obviously we noticed that hypocrisy, but it was the foundation of those ideas that even made something like the United States possible. And that is something that obviously Point of View has highlighted for over 50 years and continues to do today, leading up to our 250th anniversary as a nation, which is next year. So I do think that educational aspect is so important because, yes, a lot of those things did kind of, arise in Europe, but even that was influenced by older thinking, ancient Greece and a lot of the foundations that philosophers long before the thinkers in Europe, such as John Locke and Edmund Burke, were talking about ideas and early conservatism. Something about the founding fathers is that they were so knowledgeable about ancient wisdom, pre-Christian ancient wisdom, as well as post-Christian wisdom. They were, whether or not they agreed, they were, Christians, they were deists, they believed or they read the Bible and they were aware of that. And that really is key to, what has allowed America to survive for so long. So, Josh, I'd love to get your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we should agree on, and that is key to the whole discussion, is that the thing that makes an American is not his biological bloodline, right? I mean, we are majority European in our ethnicity here in America, but that's not the thing that makes us American. The thing that makes us American is our common ideas that stem from our common, what should be our common faith. Not every conservative is a Christian, but that's where those ideas come from. And so we've kind of already said that. I don't want to kind of beat the same topic over and over, but I do think that that's important, that's what makes, it's not biology. And that's kind of my frustration with these, I would say, pseudo-conservatives like Nick Fuentes, who make it all about this biological thing. It's not a biology. It is an ideology that stems from Christianity. But I did absolutely loved J.D. Vance's speech. I thought it hit exactly where it needed to be. And it was, what was it, about half of the speech was all about how Christianity is the underpinning that holds our country together. And that was so thrilling to me. And I was like, all right, where's the ballot box? I want to go vote for J.D. Vance for president right now. Like, I'm ready. I'm ready for him to be president, because I thought that was exactly the right thing to say.
Well, you're not alone, Josh, because I wanted to talk about this too, and people can see a link to look at these statistics for themselves at pointofview.net. But of course, the next election for president is 2028. We're not even in 2026 yet, but TPUSA does do a straw poll at their AmericaFest every year. And so this was the straw poll that was most participated in historically, according to the organizers. And it also had the youngest average age of respondent from any AmFest in history. So I think that's important to note. 85% said that they wanted J.D. Vance to be elected president in 2028. This was higher than the amount that voted in the straw poll, of course, for Trump pre-2024. Now, this is just kind of, unheard of for this early on. And so I want to come back and talk about that. But let me just go through a few other statistics, too, and then we can round out the hour kind of talking about some of these perspectives. It is important to note, because a lot of the things that, I will admit I've personally been worried and concerned seeing the popularity of podcasters who are willing to talk about things that are clearly anti-Semitic, that are talking about this, kind of blood and soil heritage American idea where your biology does influence how American you are, as we've said over and over, even in this hour, like that's not correct. And I am worried about the younger generation not recognizing the severity of those ideas in terms of how wrong they are. But 87% of attendees, and by the way, there were 30,000 attendees at AmericaFest, view America and Israel as allies. So we've heard a lot about the anti-Semitism problem. We've heard a lot about, anti-Israel sentiment among young people, including on the right. But I think that this is encouraging to note as people are debating on stage and kind of, it's getting a little heated. What does the actual person in the audience there think, who are obviously very right-leaning? 87% view Israel as an ally. Now, only 33%, so a third, viewed them as America's top ally, but only 13% viewed Israel as not an ally at all. So I think that's encouraging. Another thing that was extremely eye-opening was that 90% of attendees wanted a total pause on immigration, not illegal immigration. One of the things that they said that they were most approving of in regard to the Trump administration was mass deportations. But 90% approve a total moratorium on immigration. I think I don't agree with that. I think that's fascinating, though, in terms of how many people feel that way about that. So maybe we can talk about that when we come back from the break. But I do want to also talk about Vance, because he has not announced that he is running for 2028. Again, it's early, but Erica Kirk did kick off AmericaFest by endorsing him for president. So he hasn't announced a run, but he's clearly the front runner in terms of the young right and the young conservatives. And so when we come back, let's talk about what he said at AmFest. Let's talk about the position that he is taking on some of these debates in the conservative movement and what young voters are looking for in a presidential candidate. We're going to hear more from Ethan and his perspective as a member of Gen Z, and I hope you'll stay with us. We'll be right back after this break.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
All right, so as we said right before the break, at AmericaFest over the weekend, which is the big event from Turning Point USA, the largest number of participants and the youngest average age of respondent in their straw poll voted 85% for J.D. Vance for president in 2028. Ethan, I'd love to get your thoughts on J.D. Vance, on his address at AmFest, and is it really too early for us to even be trying to unite around a candidate? Do we need to let the primaries play out, or do we run the risk of what's happened in the past where there doesn't seem to be any sort of plan and it's just kind of chaotic? Your thoughts on any of that?
First of all, I love JD. JD's articulate. He's young. He's funny. He tells it like it is. I really don't care, Margaret. I mean, that was a classic, instant classic. I think JD is phenomenal. Not to mention he's a veteran. He's a hero. He came from the dirt, and now he's one of the most powerful people in the world. Just an absolute superstar. And no, I don't think it's too early to be coalescing around a candidate. I think we lose to the left eternally because the left knows how to march in step when they need to accomplish policy prescriptions. The right doesn't do that. We spend an entire lengthy primary process tearing each other down, digging up dirt, slandering and smearing one another, only to squeak by in the national elections. And while maybe those are good ideological debates to be having, I want to see some real change in my country, and I want to start getting my country back. And so I think that coalescing around someone who is so popular and so articulate and has so much potential like JD at this point is frankly a good idea right now. And I don't think what we need right now is a lengthy primary fight and circular firing squads on people that are not sufficiently conservative. I think what we need is pick our guy and then go for it.
You know, one of the things that I thought was interesting in this Wall Street Journal article, which we have posted at pointofview.net, is that a lot of the people who were interviewed who had voted for J.D. Vance in the straw poll, which, by the way, they had on the last night, so I think that was wise. They let the whole thing play out. Lots of people who would potentially be contenders for 2028 were able to speak, or at least major players in, a future administration. And so they really did get to see the whole gamut and then cast their vote there. But many of the people who voted said, I like him. If we were voting today, like you said, Josh, I'd vote for him. But I still, I don't want somebody to be crowned. And I think that's a fine line to walk because I agree with you, Ethan. The Republican Party has had a problem with PR, with organization. And so where do we, how do we kind of play that out? Maybe Erica Kirk, who does have a lot of influence now at Turning Point USA with the young right-leaning vote, saying, hey, we're endorsing J.D. Vance before he's even announced his run. Maybe that's one way to do it and kind of get people thinking that way. But Josh, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to have the conversation about the problems with the Republican Party institutionally, because in light of AmFest, which is 100 times better than CPAC and even the convention, the Republican convention. It's like, I've been to many CPACs, I've been to many of these other things, and AmFest is infinitely better. So it kind of just underscores the ineptitude of the institutional Republican Party. But at any rate, as far as J.D. Vance, I do think that he's a great pick, and I think he's a great pick because of his boldness. There's several other good candidates that have been very bold. Marco Rubio, others who have done excellent things and would be awesome candidates. So I do think there's a lot of things that can happen between now and then. So let's just kind of be careful. But I think it's also fine to say, look, here's a man who would be perfect for president. Let's get excited about the possibility, because that's the kind of thing that signals to a man like that, hey, you should run. So I think there's definitely a benefit to a little prematurely saying what a great opportunity that would be for him to be our next president. And to be frank, the way that I see it right now, I think that J.D. Vance would be a far better president than Donald Trump.
Mm. Yeah, I'm starting to sense that too, and just the things that I read that, as much as people loved Donald Trump, that maybe especially some of the younger voters feel like he's a little out of touch. J.D. Vance is a millennial. He seems to get it a little bit more. So we've got a few minutes left in this segment, but Ethan, I'd really love to hear from you again too. I know you were talking earlier about how your generation feels a lot of times nostalgic for an America you never got to experience, and you talked about things like affordability, but maybe go into just a couple more details. What are some specific fixes or policies that you'd like to see in a hypothetical J.D. Vance presidency?
Right. Well, I think the first thing is that J.D. Vance, he's already started to do this, is J.D. talks about Christ and God in public. That's something that I couldn't do as a kid. I never went to an official Christmas party. It was always a lame winter party or something in school. So JD is explicit that this is a Christian country founded on Christian principles, and I think that messaging alone is huge. The other thing I'd like to see is, like we kind of talked about, an immigration moratorium, not because I don't think immigrants can ever be a good thing for this country, and I think immigrants have been a good thing for this country in various forms throughout its history. But the way it's been done right now is we have not seen that assimilation to American culture. Instead, we see statues built to Hindu deities in Sugar Land, Texas, and Muslim calls to prayer in Dearborn, Michigan. We see those sorts of activities, and I start to think, am I living in America, or am I living in the Middle East, or am I living in India? And so I think an immigration moratorium is something I'd really like to see out of JD, not because immigrants are never welcome, but for right now, we need to figure out what is going on and how we can manage the assimilation process better. So that's another thing I'd like to see from JD. Last but not least, I'd like to see just a continuation of an end to foreign interventionism. I don't want to go to war in the Middle East. I don't want to be sending American troops to die in the Middle East. I want the Western Hemisphere to be our sphere of influence. I want to flex our muscle a little bit there. And I don't have as much interest in what's going on halfway around the world as what I care about in my own backyard.
Ethan, I think that you have articulated really the feelings of a lot of young people on the right, and so that's good for us to know and understand and be aware of, and I think we saw that play out at AmFest. So it's been great talking with both of you. Ethan, thanks so much for your perspective. Josh, we've got a couple minutes left. Any final thoughts from you that you'd like to leave us with before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think as far as the immigration moratorium, I 100% agree with Ethan. I think that immigrants are not a problem generally if they love our country and love what it is and love it as it's founded. But I think right now we have way too many immigrants in our country that do not love our country. And we need to be very, very, very careful. The best thing I think to do at this point is to have a moratorium on immigration until we can get all of these America haters out of the country. And then we can maybe open it back up and say, if you love America, you can come here. But for now, America's closed. I tend to agree with Ethan on that. And I think that's probably a very broad sentiment among younger voters. And I include myself in the younger ones.
Yes, of course. We are young, Josh. We are millennials and we're still young. But it's been great having both of you on Point of View Roundtable today. So I encourage anyone listening, go to pointofview.net. You can go to today's show, see the links we've been talking about, click on the links there for Ethan and Josh. You can see Josh's YouTube channel, which is always great. He explains the Bible. He's been on the Know Why podcast. We'll have to set that up again soon. And Ethan, I'd love to have you on as well. So we look forward to that. But stay with us, because when we come back, let's talk about some news of the day. A few days ago, President Trump tried to encourage Americans with all the economic wins of his administration and the things they've done. Did it sell or not? We'll get some more perspectives on that. We'll talk about the Trump administration's reclassification, rescheduling of marijuana. Good idea or bad idea? And then we'll circle back because I want to get Steven and Will's perspective on some of the stuff we've talked about in this hour as well. So it's going to be a great conversation. Stay with us for the next hour. We'll be right back here on Point of View.
Where does moral truth come from? According to 58% of Americans, individuals determine moral truth. A quarter of Generation Z says society determines moral truth, and morality can even change over time. Only 42% of Americans believe that truth comes from God. I don't know about you, but I find these numbers extremely troubling. It really is a crisis of truth, and that crisis has consequences. Look at society. Evil is called good, good called evil. People with biblical beliefs are called bigots, or worse, they're canceled. But there is hope. The Bible promises the truth will set us free, and that's why Point of View is relentless in our commitment to the ultimate source of moral truth, God's Word. At Point of View, we know that God's truth is eternal, and if we stand together, we can help more Americans apply His truth in their daily life. Help Americans find truth again by giving at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Liberty McArtor.
Welcome back to the Next Generation Roundtable on Point of View. We had a wonderful discussion in the first hour. What does it mean to be a conservative? What does it mean to be an American? What do those things mean to younger voters, millennials and Gen Z? If you missed that, please go back and listen. It's super insightful. We have some different perspectives represented. It was a really great discussion. But now I am very excited about my co-hosts for the second hour, Steven Mosley and William Barclay. Steven is a Christian conservative college administrator, school choice advocate, and former candidate for school board in Blue Fairfax County, VA. William Barclay is an award-winning political theorist and policy expert, as well as the parliamentary correspondent for the Western Standard. We'll have one of his articles to talk about here in a few minutes. Both are frequent co-hosts here on the Next Generation Roundtable. And Steven and William, it's great to have you here.
Merry Christmas. Great to be here.
Yes, Merry Christmas. It's almost that time, but we have a few more news items to discuss before we can all get merry and jolly and cozy and comfy. Hopefully, we'll all be able to have a chance to do that over the next few days. But let's talk about the economy. We have an article up at pointofview.net. So a few days ago, President Trump said that he was going to address the nation. He did. And in about 20 minutes or so, he was really just talking about all of his accomplishments in the first not even full year of his administration. He started off by saying, "I inherited a mess." That was his opening line. A lot of the blame was cast on, his predecessor, of course, President Joe Biden. And he talked about how the economy is improving. But for a lot of people, including some people on his own side who decided to speak to the media with anonymity, really didn't think he sold it well. They didn't think it was convincing. One Republican told Politico, "It's the right idea to talk about the economy more, but the execution was abysmal." Ouch. Steven, I'm going to come to you. What was your perspective on Trump's address, the economy? Just take it away. What's your thoughts?
Me and President Trump are like spirit animals, so I thought it was magnificent. But here's the thing. Though I thought the delivery was great because it wasn't too long. At 9 at night, I'm ready to go to bed. Like, unless it's going to be a real debate, like, let's get in and out. And thank God, President Trump, within 20 minutes, that's like the quickest speech I've ever heard him do. So I was happy about the length of the speech. But I will also say that I was happy about the recognition. It seems like this administration has been so focused on international affairs and cultural war issues that I firmly believe in, that they forgot to remember that if the economy's stupid, and it felt like President Trump was hitting the reset button and saying, "Listen, I hear you. I want to set the context to let you know this is Bidenflation. It's Biden's fault, but I'm going to fix it. And I thought that was good. I thought it was great that he explained his taxes. I thought it was great that he recognized there's an issue. And I thought it was great that he talked about gas prices. Now, in Blue, Northern Virginia, our gas prices haven't hit $1.98, but I'm praying for the day it does. But I have noticed that since Trump has been in office, it has teetered and gone under $3, and it's about $2.75 for unleaded. And $2.50 was the magic number under President Trump. That was the highest gas ever got here in Northern Virginia, was $2.50 the first administration. He needs to aim for that. And when people start feeling it at the pump and seeing it at the grocery store, that's when he'll get the credit.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The gas prices have been improving, but that's one of the biggest signifiers. That it's just everybody feels. And so I will say, though, he has really low approval rating on the economy right now. Now, to be fair, just today, the Commerce Department reported that the GDP increased at an annual rate of 4.3% in the third quarter. So that's good news. A lot of what President Trump and even Vice President Vance have said recently is to be patient. I do think, because we were talking about some AmFest news in the last hour and J.D. Vance's address there, one of the things he said is that I feel you, I understand you're impatient, like keep pushing for the policies that you want. Somebody made a point in this Politico article that maybe, saying kind of I feel you, I understand how hard it feels right now isn't a club in Trump's bag. And maybe there are some younger voters where they aren't really seeing him as being relatable right now. Biden, and of course there are clear differences just, statistically, but Biden did a lot of saying, look at this, the economy is improving, and people didn't feel it. So people are still kind of hurting with a lot of food prices, even though they're improving a little bit. Obviously, like you said, the gas prices are good. But go ahead.
And I would say the difference between Biden and Trump is this. Biden told you stuff that you knew were a lie. Every day, the prices were going higher and higher and higher. The point that I made was a statistical point you could look at. Are gas prices lower today than they were last year at this time? The answer is yes. So with President Trump, you can actually see things going in the right direction. With President Biden, you knew things were going in the wrong direction. And that's the reason why President Trump overwhelmingly won those 7 swing states and won the presidency last year.
Yes. So maybe more people need to get the message then, because according to a CBS News and YouGov poll, 61% of U.S. adults say that Trump is making prices and inflation sound better than they really are. And we know that Democrats are going to capitalize on this. Affordability is the big word heading into the midterms. And so we're going to see how that plays out. So, Will, I know you're our resident Canadian, like I always like to say, but I'd still love your perspective. We got a couple minutes before the break on just the Trump administration, the United States, from an outsider's perspective looking in. What would you like to say?
Yeah, so what really sticks out to me here is communication. I think that the Trump administration is starting to lose the messaging war on affordability and the economy. And I think that Trump's decision to heap all of America's economic woes and problems on the back of former President Biden has kind of started to backfire a little bit as of late, because even though it is overwhelmingly true that the Democrats have ruined the U.S. economy, the American people are, again, looking for solutions now to their current plight. Not more of an explanation as to why it happened. It's no longer so much about I feel your pain, but more so this is the way out, and here's why you can trust me. And it's unfortunate because Trump has historically been so successful at exposing the utter fallacy of the globalist paradigm and laying bare the fact that globalism's success has long been predicated upon American excellence and very much extracted from the American people. And I think that's very much what he needs to get back to, offering America solutions and disengaging it from the political structures that are keeping Americans poor and their economy crippled. But more importantly, connecting the dots and communicating effectively to Americans how the USA's current growing pains will inevitably result in a better future for them and their children, because this is the reality. There has been steady job growth, low unemployment, and an inflation rate that's ticking down in America. The Trump administration is simply doing a bad job of communicating it effectively, and so Americans are unsure about how their current plight will translate into lower prices on things like gas and eggs, and simply put, result in a better life. Trust is eroded in America, and I think very much it just needs to be reestablished.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. It really is about communication. I think one of the reasons that President Trump was elected initially in 2016 and again in 2024 that people really need to make sure that they don't forget is that he made so many Americans who had felt ignored by the current political situation seen and heard. And, I think that some people, whether it's accurate or not, are starting to view him as maybe becoming a little bit encumbered by that swamp that he set out to drain. And again, obviously, once you get into politics and you get into the White House and you get into the process, there is a process, and a lot of times it takes time. But again, as this poll that I was referencing shows, and like you said, Will, too, a lot of people, until they notice it at the gas pump or in their weekly grocery shopping trip, they're not really going to relate to some of those benefits that Trump is touting. However, they are there statistically. So you can read that article in full at pointofview.net, but we have more to discuss when we come back, so stay with us.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
During this Christmas week, we've been providing a theological perspective on some of the classic Christmas carols, but today I thought we might look at a contemporary song associated with the Christmas story. Mary Did You Know is a Christmas song addressing Mary, the mother of Jesus. The lyrics were written by Mark Lowry in 1984. The music was written by Buddy Green in 1991. It was originally recorded by Michael English in his 1991 solo album. The song asks many questions. None of the questions are answered in the song. Instead, the lyrics poetically invite the listener to contemplate the relationship between Mary and her newborn divine son. It implies that she may not have understood what would unfold. That is possible since Jesus humbled himself to live as we do. The Bible tells us in Philippians 2 that Jesus emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant and being made in the likeness of men. The first stanza begins with these questions. Mary, did you know that your baby boy will one day walk on water? Mary, did you know that your baby boy will save our sons and daughters? Did you know that your baby boy has come to make you new? This child that you delivered will soon deliver you. The last stanza ends with these questions. Mary, did you know that your baby boy is Lord of all creation? Mary, did you know that your baby boy will one day rule the nations? Did you know that your baby boy is heaven's perfect lamb? This sleeping child you're holding is the great I Am. These questions cause us to reflect on the wonder of the incarnation of Jesus. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. We're on the Next Generation Roundtable today. I'm joined by Will Barclay and Steven Mosley. So we were talking about the economy. President Trump did talk about some of the improvements and the accomplishments that he's made, but a lot of the American public are still skeptical simply because they may still be struggling. Maybe those benefits haven't impacted them directly yet. And of course, I think Will made a good point. Maybe they're tired of hearing blame, even if it's accurate, on the last administration. But let's talk about something else that I think traditionally, or not traditionally, but at least currently does have a lot of support, increasing bipartisan support, which is the decriminalization or legalization of marijuana, both for recreational and medicinal use. And so recently we have this article up at pointofview.net. Trump ordered cannabis to be reclassified as a less dangerous drug. So specifically, he ordered the FDA to reclassify it, change it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. So what that means is Schedule 3 drugs are classified as having a potential for abuse less than the drugs or other substances in Schedules 1 and 2. So heroin would be Schedule 1. Something else that is still extremely strong, like ketamine, might be scheduled as Schedule 3, where you can get it through a prescription for medicinal use. And so this is something he talked about in the lead up to his election in 2024. But Steven, feel free to wrap up any final thoughts on the economy, but I also want to get your thoughts on this and how it really does kind of open the door for easier legalization of marijuana in multiple states who have not taken that step yet.
Yeah, I would say with the economy, Lord willing, with those tax cuts and everything else, we will start seeing it. And most importantly, people start feeling it, right? People start feeling that it's going in the right direction. I really do believe it's all about feeling, not about knowing, because if it's about knowing, the poll numbers would not be so low. So it's really about feeling. You got to feel it. Your pocket has to feel it. Drugs. This is a topic that I think as Christians we really have to be talking about. One, I would say there is a big myth out there when it comes to Schedule 1, Schedule 3. People think of it as like, oh, this is just as harmful as, right? So they'll say Schedule 1, geez Louise, marijuana and drugs like, heroin are on the same schedule. And it's like, hold on. First, think about it. What does that mean? The schedule means that it's addictive.
Yeah.
And there's not much use for medical use for it at this time.
Right.
Right? That's what the schedule means. And so it's not about like how bad something is or how quick it is to kill you. It's more about those two things. So that's one thing I want our audience to know. Number two, I want you to think about this for a moment. Schedule 3 means it's not supposed to be addictive, right? You don't see many people taking testosterone and then they're driving their cars into you, though you are seeing that with marijuana. In every state that has legalized marijuana or decriminalized it, it's what I like to use because they didn't legalize anything. They decriminalized it. You see an uptick in marijuana use. You see an uptick in fatal car crashes. And if you have a wife, you know this to be true. You have a wife that says, hey, could you come with me to the store to go shopping because it stinks and the people are a little nuts out there. And I want to live in a world where my wife can go shopping without me because she loves it and I love it for her because it's safe, that it feels safe, that, like, yet again, we're talking about the economy. If you feel the impact, it's going to be there. Same thing here. If you are in this area, the pot McDonald's that smells like marijuana or the people that smell like it walking into the store, it does not make your wives feel safe. This was a huge blunder by the Trump administration. And all other administrations have attempted it because a drug-free life is the best life to have. And what we do here with marijuana, we keep going down this road. It's going to create a multiplicity of other problems that you already see happening in states that have decriminalized it. And so we are going, unfortunately, in the wrong direction on marijuana because we have this wrong paradigm that we think it's not as harmful as the others. When it's not about harm, it's about what is it doing. It was Schedule 1 because it was addictive and had not much medical use at that time. Yeah,
great delineations there, Steven. So if you go to pointofview.net, again, there are so many resources. Kirby writes about every single topic and has written about every topic you can imagine multiple times probably. So if you go to pointofview.net and go to the search bar and just search marijuana, you can see some of the articles that he's talked about, some of the commentaries he's written. This is, I guess, not surprising because, again, a Gallup poll shows that 64% of U.S. adults think that marijuana should be legal. But since 1970, it's been classified as Schedule 1, and most marijuana that you would find today has only gotten more potent. There's higher THC levels. So some people who kind of maybe are a little skeptical, like, really, it's not that big of a deal. Like, I smoked weed as a teenager, well, it's different and it is more addictive. And there are studies that show the damage it causes to your brain, the addictive qualities of it. And like you said, increase in car accidents and criminal activity in states that have decriminalized it. Will, I'd love to get your perspective because if I'm not mistaken, marijuana has been legal for recreational and medicinal use in Canada since 2018. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but what's your perspective on this issue?
Yeah, so I think that both you made some great points. I think that it's important to keep in mind that the order hasn't legalized cannabis federally, as both said, and that the reclassification of cannabis isn't some kind of moral pronouncement about the substance. Trump himself said something along the lines of, I promise to be the president of common sense, and I think that's what we're seeing here. President Trump has directed the federal government to reclassify cannabis as a less dangerous drug, which ostensibly will reinvigorate the legal marijuana industry, eliminate tax burdens, that have made profitability, I guess, an uphill battle and allow for important and oftentimes urgent medical research that was previously rendered simply impossible because of its previous drug classification. And I think that's maybe what we can try to keep in mind here. The move was not, again, some kind of moral pronouncement or concession that cannabis is either good or bad, harmless or harmful. Rather, it was a common-sense political maneuver by the Trump administration aimed at invigorating a lapsed area of the USA's economy and American research more so. And I think that in a way we all forget exactly how young, how new the phenomenon of widespread legal or decriminalized cannabis truly is. And I think in a lot of ways, perhaps what we're seeing is that the ethics is finally catching up to the innovation. And again, not to say good or bad either way again. I just think that we're finally being forced to think and work through all of the societal progress that people clamored so vigorously for in the past. You know, we're finally being forced to, again, think it through and deal with the ethical ramifications of it.
You're right. It's not a federal legalization of it. I will say, though, people who are advocates for legalization are definitely cheering this move. It will allow more research to take place. But one executive of a cannabis company that's based in Florida said it's a win for millions of Americans who rely on medical marijuana today. It's just a meaningful step towards modernizing cannabis policy and allowing the regulated industry to continue to displace illicit operators. So I definitely value your perspective, Will. But Steven, I also feel like that's always the line, isn't it?
If I could add on that,
jump in, please.
I would say that with this one, we want to be clear. They were able to do, this is a win for big weed, right? It's just like big pharma all over again. This is not a win for the average person. And the idea here that universities weren't able to study marijuana's impacts before, it's not true. Now, there were more barriers, but it wasn't impossible. And I think the issue here is anytime you make it more accessible, which is what Schedule 3 will do, it increased the use. Like right now, even though it's illegal, and in my state of Virginia, you can have it, you can possess it, but you can't buy it. There's a lot of people who are possessing it. And I think the issue here is that it's not something that needed to be done in order to get the aims across. And the argument, and unfortunately, President Trump has used this argument before, and he does it consistently with people that he disagrees with. So you're saying, one, my favorite, like, no one disagrees with me on this, and then he puts ahead a policy that people have obviously been disagreeing on. And we saw this last year with the right to life and states, the issue that it should be done at the states and not federal level. And all of us who are pro-life are like, no, it should be done everywhere. He's doing it here with the idea of, like, the harm that is done to people and trying to say, like, Schedule 1, Schedule 3, we need to bring it down because it's not harmful. So it's a miss there. And the idea that it's just for, hey, we got to make sure people can get their medicine. And we got to make it, we have to make it so that they can study it. And that is just, unfortunately, not the full truth. And I hate to disagree with the president. I gave him a compliment in the last hour or in the last segment to say, hey, he's just wrong here. And this is going to have more damaging impacts on the society as a whole. More people with access to marijuana is not a good thing. And we as a culture have to be strong on that, even when the polls are against us, just like it has been against us on biblical marriage and at one time on the issue of life. It's now against us on this issue of marijuana and drug use. And the damage will be when it hits society, is it will impact everyone. It will impact everyone.
Yeah, good point, Steven. So, again, you can find the article, read more about it yourself at pointofview.net. It's important to have these conversations because the majority of Americans do support legalization of marijuana, especially younger voters. And so we're all about highlighting what younger voters are talking about on the Next Generation Roundtable. So that's why we need to be educated about what's actually happening. So we have more to talk about, an article that's really important from Will that we'll be highlighting when we come back from this short break.
Do not miss the fact that this is an exciting time in America. Record numbers of Gen Z returning to church, reading the Bible. God is clearly moving. But it's also a critical time. Without trustworthy biblical guidance, without spiritual mentors willing to disciple, those young people full of zeal today could be led astray tomorrow. And that's why I urge you to partner with Point of View and equip the mentors the next generation needs. When you support Point of View, you provide a wealth of resources to equip Americans to think biblically about every issue relevant to life today. Your support could supply the tools that someone needs to apply biblical truth in discipleship. So partner with us today, and your gift will be doubled through December 31st. So give today at pointofview.net, or you can call us 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net, and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Liberty McArtor.
Welcome back to the Roundtable. Go to pointofview.net, click on the articles there, and you can see this one from Will Barclay, one of our co-hosts this hour. Christmas Markets, Islamic Terrorism, and Destabilizing Effects of International Migration in Europe. Will, you write about how in Germany and France specifically, you have Christmas markets that are actually now being fortified with concrete barriers because of the prevalence of terrorist attacks that are happening over there against Christians. And so talk us through your article and kind of what's happening over in Europe right now.
Yeah, absolutely. This assault on Europe's Christian heritage is really one ominous symptom of a far greater disease that now menaces all the European continent. What we've seen is that throughout the modern era, countless European states have become violently destabilized and plagued by national insecurity due to the fact that the European Union's hyper-liberal migration policies have permitted a slew of illicit migrants from the Middle East and North Africa to migrate within the EU under the pretense that they're legitimate immigrants and seeking asylum. Now, firstly, we have illicit migrants from the Middle East and North Africa that have inundated Europe with sexual assault and violent crimes throughout the modern era. In Sweden, 58% of people charged for general crime and migrants. And with regards to murder, manslaughter, and attempted murder, the figure actually jumps to 73%, with robbery coming in at 70%. In fact, a landmark study by Lund University recently confirmed that nearly two-thirds, or 66% of convicted rapists in Sweden, are migrants or second-generation immigrants. Moreover, illicit migrants from the Middle East and North Africa have imported brutal species of Islamic terrorism and extremism within various European states. Now, over the past decade, France has been forced to endure 53 major terrorist attacks, and nearly 30 innocent French people have been murdered by Islamic terrorists every year. In fact, the French state has thwarted 6 serious terrorist attacks over the past year alone, and the city of Paris was actually recently forced to cancel its historic New Year's Eve fete along the iconic Champs-Élysées due to the looming threat of migrant violence and severe security risks from potential terrorist threats. Now, finally, illicit migrants from the Middle East and North Africa have established violent Islamic enclaves and no-go zones in countless EU states and major cities throughout Europe. One leaked internal report actually indicates that Germany is currently afflicted by 44 no-go zones and warns that German police are no longer able to guarantee public order in the long term. In addition, the chairman of Germany's largest police union has explicitly stated that Germany is now facing a challenge that is unprecedented in post-war history, and that the risk of collapse is very real. If no action is taken, Sharia law will prevail instead of the Constitution. And I mean, the sad truth is that there's no end to this in sight. The torrent of illegal migrants from the Middle East and North Africa will continue to inundate Europe with violent insecurity and terrorize the European people until every nation in Europe decisively rejects the EU's inadequate, hyper-liberal migration policies and expels every Islamic extremist and illicit migrant from within its society.
So over the weekend, and thank you, Will, again, you can read that article at pointofview.net. But I think this is an issue that a lot of people are concerned about. In the last hour, if you're with us, you know, we talked about AmericaFest, which was the big Turning Point USA event over the weekend. And so their straw poll, which was the biggest and youngest on average that they've done with 30,000 attendees, asked, what are the top threats facing America? And number one among respondents was radical Islam. And we also talked about immigration. So this was an interesting conversation in the last hour. 90% of people in that same straw poll said that they want a moratorium on all immigration. So, Steven, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that we're boiling over at AmFest here in a few minutes. But with regard specifically to radical Islam, immigration, the things that we're seeing play out in Europe, what do you think is a takeaway for us as Americans?
As Americans, we need to understand that we're not isolated just because we're across the pond. We need to understand that when it comes to Christianity, we need to be praying for revival here in America. Because here's the deal. What's happening there in Europe, there are usually a couple of, steps ahead of us. The problem there is they left God a long time ago, and now their culture's catching up. And when we look at our numbers here in America, we're not that far behind. I mean, when I grew up in the 90s, 90% of people claimed to be Christians. Now it's less than 60.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're honest with yourself, you'd say, are my neighbors more Christian today than they were a decade ago? I mean, go outside and look at the Christmas decorations. In Northern Virginia, we go out and look at the Christmas decorations. We never see a baby in a manger. And we rarely see Santa Claus.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to think about that. That's symbols within our culture. So we need to understand that we need real revival to get real Christianity to make our nation truly a Christian nation. The second step is what really they're fighting for in Europe, which is a Christianized nation, a nation based on Christian ideas, and they're losing it there because our audience need to understand that Sharia law is a concept that means that you take the Muslim faith and you intertwine that with your laws, and you're starting to see how it's incompatible with laws that are based on a Christian value system, such as the freedom of speech or freedom of religion to evangelize. You try to evangelize in these countries to convert a Muslim to Christianity, and that Muslim could lose their life, and so could you as a Christian there. So that's the mindset they're bringing on. And in Europe, they'll talk about it. They'll talk about how, here's irony. They'll talk about how they're not good at homosexuality, right? Like, if you were gay and in one of these Sharia law countries, you could die for being gay. You can't do that in our country. Mm-hmm. And some like Iran, women mustn't wear the hijab, or they're going to go to jail. So that's Sharia law. It takes their faith and combines it with law and makes it for everyone who's there. And what they're seeing is it doesn't just stick to their small culture, right? It doesn't just stick to their community. It impacts everyone's community. And so political Christianity is kind of what we're seeing in our country now, where people are like, yeah, God, faith, and freedom. But are they really coming to know Jesus? Because he is truly the answer to fix this problem.
Yeah, such an important point, Stephen. And we are seeing a lot of young people who are expressing interest in Christianity, which is encouraging. But then you're going to have questions like, this. Okay, well, if you want to advocate for religious freedom, then what's the problem with Sharia law? Shouldn't people be able to practice their religion in our nation? Again, Kirby has a great booklet on this you can request from Point of View. But again, as J.D. Vance did a great job of addressing over the weekend, it was the Christian foundation and moral principles of America that gave rise to religious liberty. And it doesn't mean that everybody has to practice the same faith. But we do have to treat every single person with inherent dignity and respect. And Sharia law does not do that. We only have about 2.5 minutes before the break. We'll talk about this more when we come back. But Will, on the policy aspect of it, how did this happen? And how do other countries prevent this from happening or stop it from happening? A lot of it is illegal migration, refugee excuses, I guess. But how did this infiltration of not true refugees, but radical Islamists, how did this happen in Europe? I'd love to get your thoughts.
Well, I think that we have to keep in mind that one of the quintessential aspects of any failing or failed state is the inability to maintain sovereign control of its borders. And I think that's exactly what we've seen happen in Europe with regards to the EU member states. With the EU and its inadequate hyper-liberal migration policies, we've seen various states such as France and Germany become rendered unable to control who comes in and out of their country. And what has come with that is very much the second characteristic of any failed state, this inability to maintain a monopoly on the legitimate use of force within its society. And so, again, we see that this issue of borders and being able to maintain sovereign control of our borders is paramount. I think the other thing that many states have failed to kind of embrace until very recently is that there is a difference between ideologies that disagree and ideologies that are inherently contradictory. For instance, conservatism and liberalism are different perspectives of the same painting, whereas, let's say, Orthodox Islamic ideology, well, it rejects various principles that are inherent and fundamental to any classical liberal or conservative ideology: the equality of all people, the religious freedom, personal agency, and the ability to, let's say, reject any dogma that we disagree with. These are things that are simply impossible in any Orthodox Islamic society, and it renders any Orthodox Islamic ideology inherently contradictory and incompatible with any classical liberal state. I think it's just a fact that no two inherently contradictory ideologies can inhabit the same social confines without the outbreak of violence.
Yeah, those are great points, and that's the kind of thinking and critical thinking that we really need to do. And I think young voters, young conservatives are paying attention to this because, again, this is just a straw poll, but it was a large sample, and so I think it's important to note that asked what the Trump administration's top accomplishments were so far over the weekend, the top answer was securing the border. And we talked about immigration. I'd love to talk about it when we come back from the break and get more perspectives on that. But I do think that regardless of whether you're pro-legal immigration, want a temporary moratorium, when you have immigration, especially when we're talking about in the context of the United States, making sure that people who want to come over here are coming here because they love America and they do want to be American. And so you can secure your borders and I think make a robust case for legal immigration. And so I would love to hear more perspectives articulate that. And I know that we will in the years to come leading up to the midterm and the next presidential election. But this is definitely a relevant debate. And so I appreciate Will's perspective on what's happening over in Europe and what we can learn from that. But don't go anywhere because we have more to discuss when we come back in just a few minutes. So stay with us on Point of View.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
As we wrap up this hour, I would love to get Steven and Will's perspective on the future of the young right. So I know that there are a lot of similar concerns among young voters in Europe, in Canada, and in the United States. You're definitely seeing a wave of populism in all of those places. So let's talk about it. And just to reiterate some things we talked about in the last hour, I think AmericaFest, Turning Point USA has done a great job of becoming kind of that check on the pulse of where the young right is. And so their straw poll over the weekend found that 85% want Vance in 2028, J.D. Vance for president in 2028. He was actually endorsed by Turning Point CEO Erica Kirk, even though he has not officially announced a run. 87% of attendees, and this was out of 30,000 people, viewed Israel as an ally. I should say 30,000 in attendance, but they did say the largest number of respondents they'd had for the straw poll. But 87% view Israel as an ally. And I was actually encouraged by that because we have talked a lot about anti-Semitism here on Point of View and on the Roundtable, and I've seen a lot of that, especially with young Americans. And so I think that it is important to know that maybe what a lot of the voices we hear going viral, saying incendiary things, maybe that's not completely representative of what people are actually believing. And then again, this was big. 90% in that poll wanted a total pause on immigration. You also had some back and forth, to put it mildly, of what does it mean to be a conservative? Can we have debate? Can we have a big tent? Do we need to draw firmer boundaries around our conservative movement and say certain people aren't on the team, especially when they spout conspiracy theories or hatred toward a people group? And I would agree with that. So, Steven, let me start with you. Really anything regarding what happened over the weekend or the future of the movement, anything that stuck out to you, I'd love for you to take it away.
Absolutely. Well, Liberty and Will, it's been magnificent being with you for this hour. I tell you, man, does time fly.
It does.
I am very encouraged to hear that 87% see Israel as an ally. I mean, that is one of the things that you see all the time online. You're like, man, the Gen Z and Alpha don't love Israel, and we got to get Genesis 12, 15, and 17 a relook. So that was really, really good, encouraging to hear. When it comes to immigration, I have been an immigration advocate for my whole adult life. And what I mean by that is this. I believe immigration should benefit the American worker, not the American business, not the focus of another country, but the American worker. And right now, we have to argue that the way we've done immigration, illegal and legal, has not been to the benefit of the American worker. And so, yeah, we definitely need a pause on immigration. And I would say the pause needs to be until we get every illegal out of the country. We have 20 million illegals here. That is taking up resources, time, and effort. And so you got to benefit your American worker. And I think there's the group that has an article about how illegal immigration and legal immigration has a negative impact on the African American community. As an African American, I'm really concerned about that. And so I would say, look, if that's the route we need to go with immigration, I don't see any candidate pushing that. I think the closest one years ago is Rick Santorum was pushing that. Great candidate. But I think the America First security methods, and that's what they're talking about with Trump, we need to make sure America is safe and secure our borders. I would love to actually see the big, beautiful wall come up. I would love to see the focus on the American worker when it comes to the H-1B issue, because I think that's where President Trump really gets in trouble is, the American workers looking at it and say, look, I find jobs online that H-1B visa holders are having that I'm qualified for. That's not acceptable. It's just not. And so those things have to change for truly to make America great. And then once you do that, then you can let in all the people you want to let in to fill in the gaps because you took care of your family first. Your countrymen are your family first. Then you go take care of others. And that needs to be the focus. Instead, historically in our country, it's been about big business. And I'd argue also the Democrat Party is about replacing voters because they realize that they can't win with the American voters. They're like, hey, let's bring in a lot of new voters. And that's why they used to always term the phrase in the 90s and early 00s, demographics is destiny. And then out of nowhere, conservatives pointed that out. And they're like, oh, no, we never said that. And they got caught because that was an idea from the left. And so if we can do that, then we can get back to bringing people into the country. But I think we do. I would agree with the young people here that, we need a pause until we can focus on the American worker and making sure that they are doing great.
Yeah, I think that's a good perspective, Stephen. I think a lot of people relate to that. Will, when you look at the top 5 issues or threats facing America, according to this poll, I think there is actually a lot of commonality with other people on the right in other nations. So I'd love to get your perspective. But number 1 threat was radical Islam. Number 2, socialism and Marxism, which is interesting since we are seeing some socialists get elected here in various races in the United States. Number 3, mass migration. Number 4, the economy and affordability. And then number 5 was corrupt courts. But a lot of those, I think, are issues that are kind of concerning conservatives more broadly. So what's your perspective on that, Will?
I think you're exactly right. I think that if you were to poll Canadians, especially young Canadians, we'd probably articulate many of the same issues. I think, for instance, one of the funnier ones, we've spoken about this before, is that radical Islam, Islamic extremists, and the left, they're socialists, they very much do go hand in hand. They have a very intimate relationship. There's a lot of ideological commonality. They both have a very rigid gender ideology, for instance, and then they prescribe violence for anybody who would oppose them. They're actually quite happy bedmates. One thing I will say, though, is that the future of the right here in Canada is a lot different, a lot more uncertain than I think it is over in America. Our society has been dominated by liberal politics for over a decade, and it looks like it'll be that way, the case for the foreseeable future. And so what we need going forward is a bit different. We don't really have a prominent or popular conservative voice in the same vein as a Charlie Kirk or even Ben Shapiro. We need a leader. That's very much our great need. And I think in a lot of ways, really the role that I've personally started to step into, given our dire circumstances. And we've made some great progress. I think Fox did recently call me Canada's foremost young conservative voice. So if you're a resident Canadian here on Point of View, Miss Liberty, I think we're doing okay in that regard. But in my many travels, something I've noticed has remained the same for all young people, all types of people actually, regardless of the geographic location, is that people everywhere are searching to reestablish trust, faith, and belief in something. And so they're inevitably looking for a structure and something to believe in. And that's something that conservatism uniquely offers. The left is not something to believe in, a belief in the good, truth, God. And what comes with that is the notion of what to do when your life is in shambles, right? An idea of this. And this is what everyone is searching for right now, young, old, on the right, on the left. And so this is what we as conservatives must offer the world right now, the good and the beacon of light, the hope that comes along with it.
Yeah, so well said, Will. And I think that's a great note to end on, especially as we are heading into Christmas. And so we're praying for you. We're praying for you in Canada, and so thankful for your voice, including here on Point of View. And Stephen, it's been great to have you on Point of View. Thanks so much for being on today as well.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it's been a wonderful 2 hours. And so, again, it does fly by. It goes by so fast. So if you missed any part of it, I encourage you over the next few days or over your holiday break, go to pointofview.net, listen to what we're talking about, and be in prayer for the future of the United States, for our friends around the world, and be a force for good wherever you are. You can help offer that encouragement and that hope that so many young people are looking for. And here in the United States, we are seeing a turn. More members of Gen Z are looking for truth. They're going back to church, especially over this weekend. You may see even more people coming to church looking for those answers. So be a light, be an encouragement, and point them to truth. And we hope that we can help do that here on Point of View. Again, it's been great being with you. We hope that you have a very Merry Christmas and enjoy the next couple of days. Thanks for being with us on Point of View.
It was not that long ago that censorship appeared to be almost inevitable. Free speech was being attacked and strangled in many places. And some of us wondered if this was the end. But now, many feel a new sense of hope, a chance for a fresh dawn. Let me caution you, now is not the time to relax. It's a time to press forward, to use this fresh opportunity to proclaim and learn how to apply truth to current issues. By the fact you're here, listening right now, that tells me that you recognize the vital role Point of View plays as a voice of truth. For more than 50 years, we've informed and equipped people who have made a real difference. And when you give to Point of View today, you breathe life into what can be a new golden era for the truth. Please, take a moment right now and invest in truth. Visit pointofview.net or give it 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. Click in now or call 1-800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.